Today I'm talking with Dan Farah, director of the fascinating new film, Age of Disclosure, which asks the question, are we alone in the universe? And makes a compelling case that we are not. In the film, Dan talks to pilots, members of the intelligence and military communities, and politicians from the Democratic and Republican parties to find out what is going on with UFOs, aka UAPs, which stands for Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. The film makes a rather mind-blowing argument that for 80 years, countries including the United States and Russia have been involved in a new kind of space race to reverse engineer alien technology that has landed on Earth.
This is the biggest discovery in human history.
Dan is also a producer of projects including the Shannara Chronicles and Ready Player One, on which he collaborated with one of his childhood heroes, director Steven Spielberg. Now, here's my talk with Dan Farah, director of Age of Disclosure, which is now available on Prime Video. I don't know if people watching this for the first time really have a grasp of what your central thesis is. Can you explain what Age of Disclosure is about?
Yeah, so I interviewed 34 very high-level military, government, and intelligence officials who collectively break their silence to reveal that there's been an 80-year cover-up of the existence of non-human intelligent life. And on top of that, they reveal that elements of the U.S. government are deeply involved in a secret, high-stakes Cold War race with adversarial nations like China and Russia to reverse engineer technology of non-human origin. And as extraordinary as all that sounds, the people I interviewed are incredibly credible. Ranges from Marco Rubio, who's now our Secretary of State and our National Security Advisor, to sitting senators from both sides of the aisle, former White House National Security Council members, leadership of recent classified government UAP programs, fighter pilots, CIA officials, Air Force officials, generals, admirals. It's this, unbelievably, credible collection of people who all put their name and reputation on the line to share what they lawfully can.
And if the names fly by a little quickly in the film, I realized today you can just go on IMDb and look them all up and judge for yourself whether they're credible. It's a situation where the first person you go, oh, that's impressive, but maybe they just found one outlier. And then you have a dozen more in the first few minutes of the film. It's really pretty astonishing. And as you said, Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, you have Kristen Gillibrand, you have AOC, you have Robert Garcia, who I think are both in archive footage, but are still in the film. Really a wide range of people from all political beliefs who are saying the same thing, which is that this information needs to be released.
Yeah, General Jim Clapper, who's never spoken publicly about this topic in his life. He was the director of national intelligence. He was the head of Air Force intelligence. Really, really senior guy. At Navy admirals, the head of aviation security from Obama's White House National Security Council. Extremely serious people who have a lot to lose by misleading the public. And they're going on the record saying what they know to be true. And so I think, it's really shocking how much there is that they chose to disclose and that couldn't be lawfully disclosed. And also, one of the things that comes up in a lot of these conversations I have is if all this profound information that they reveal is what they can lawfully disclose, what's on the other side of that line? What's the stuff that has to remain classified?
And you're not using like cheesy reenactments. You're not using animation of things that might have happened. It's more in the style of PBS's Frontline than your typical shocking UFO doc that you see on basic cable. It's a really well-constructed documentary that I think people will find fascinating, whether they are like me, someone who has really no preordained ideas about whether UAPs exist, or whether they're a diehard for either side. So I think it has a lot of integrity and
thank you.
Yeah.
That's why I set off to make a serious, sober, credible documentary and stay away from sensationalism. I didn't want to do anything that was sensational. I grew up, my childhood was the 80s and early 90s, and I grew up on movies like Close Encounters and E.T. and TV shows like X-Files that totally captured my interest in this topic and these big questions like, are we alone in the universe? Have we been visited by life from elsewhere? does the government know more about this than the public? And so over the years, I've consumed every documentary, I've read every book on this topic, but I always wish that someone would make a very serious, credible documentary about this that only interviewed people who have direct knowledge of it as a result of working for the U.S. government. I always wish some filmmaker went and did that and set the bar there, but it never happened. And no one ever made that movie. And it was around the time that I was fortunate to be a producer on Ready Player One, which Steven Spielberg directed. And it was on the set of Ready Player One, seeing him direct in person and being inspired by that got sort of like the gear spinning for me of like, okay, maybe I'd like to direct something one day after years of producing. What would that be? And then eventually, a few years after that, I came to the conclusion that if I was ever going to direct something like this, it should be this documentary that I wish existed, and I would go try to create the documentary that I personally wanted to watch, and so that was sort of the mission for me was to bring about the most credible, serious, non-sensational doc that only interviewed very credible people who have knowledge as a result of working for the U.S. government.
It's hard not to sound conspiratorial with anything you say around UAPs or UFOs, but there is something that I thought about when I realized that you were a producer on Ready Player One and that you know Steven Spielberg. The film suggests about midway through that the Legacy Recovery Program, which is the program to sort of recover UAPs and hide the existence of UAPs, also includes a component of trying to miseducate the public or confuse the public or sort of muddy the waters around the question of UAPs so that people are uncomfortable even asking about them. And that includes Hollywood films that make people feel silly if they ask questions seriously about UAPs. And if I were part of the government and was trying to trick the public, I would probably start with one of the biggest filmmakers and one of the people who has most shaped our beliefs and our impressions of extraterrestrials is, of course, Steven Spielberg. So has he had any contact, to your knowledge, with the government? Do you think he's had any inside information, maybe when he was making those films? Because what people see in E.T. and Close Encounters seems to parallel pretty closely what they report seeing in UAPs.
I honestly don't know. I mean, I don't want to disappoint your listeners, but the truth is I don't know. I personally think Steven's the greatest filmmaker that's ever lived, and those movies he made on this topic early on, like Close Encounters and E.T., they just really inspired me and my curiosity. And I don't think I ever would have ended up wanting to make this film had I not been made curious about this by those films early on in my life. Yeah.
And I'm not saying he's part of a government conspiracy to trick people. I'm saying, is it possible that someone in the government was impressed with his filmmaking and said, "Hey, look, I got to show you this. It's really cool"?
I honestly don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know. I think certainly anything is possible, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the amazing thing about movies is they do have a power to pique people's interest in things and to motivate people, to inspire people. So that's what I love about movies. My first job was ripping tickets at my local movie theater because I love movies so much, and I think there's a power in movies that no other form of storytelling has. And I hope that one of the things that comes out of this film existing is other people getting inspired. There's a lot of unanswered questions on this front, separate to what is publicly known and what is known by our secret programs. There's still a lot to learn, and there's a whole lot of scientific breakthroughs for future generations to happen. So my hope is that one of the things that comes out of this film is it inspires future generations to take this topic more seriously, look into it more seriously. As the film reveals, there's a lot of great advancements that could come out of studying this technology. And one of the hurdles we face as a society right now is most of the scientific community doesn't even know it's a valid area of inquiry. They don't even know it's a real situation. And so, if this film inspires some, bright young genius who's trying to figure out what he wants to do with his life to like apply it to this, that's an amazing thing,
Yeah, you make the point in the film, or the people you interview in the film make the point that these craft, whatever we call them, UAPs, some of them are going reportedly going 32,000 miles an hour and doing things that earthly craft cannot do, which suggests that they found some new kind of fuel source or some way of sort of transcending space and time. And that, of course, would be very beneficial to everybody on this planet, in terms of, less reliance on fossil fuels, greater speed, teleportation, who knows? All sorts of things that sound completely crazy that these UAPs can apparently do if they're real.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we're way past the point of questioning whether it's real or not. The 34 people who speak on camera in my film all go on the record, making it extremely clear this is a real situation. The big questions now are the non-human intelligent life that is controlling these UAP, where are they from, and what's their intention? Yeah. Those are the big questions. And then, the other big question, of course, is how can we benefit from understanding this technology? This technology can either, as people in my film say, this technology can either revolutionize the way we live and change the trajectory of our species. It could potentially be the solution to the energy crisis. It could lead to interstellar travel. All these breakthroughs that sounded like science fiction just a few years ago could be possible if we understand this technology. But at the same time, as people in my film say, this technology could be used for bad. It could be used to create weapons of mass destruction. It can be used by bad actors. And so, as a couple of the people in the film talk about, it essentially is a humanitarian issue. It's not just an American issue. It's a humanity issue, humanitarian issue of navigating this in a way that's beneficial to mankind and not destructive. And I think one of the best analogies for the situation is made in the film, which is when we entered the space race. Kennedy gave this great speech at I believe it was Rice University, where he declared that the U.S. was determined to win the space race. And then he explained why it was important. And he said that technology, space technology, he said, like nuclear technology before it, has no conscience of its own, that it can either be used for good or for bad. And it's up to mankind which way that goes, whether it's used for the betterment of mankind or whether it's used to create a new sea of war, as he put it. Yeah. And, this situation is very similar to that, with much higher stakes.
Do you feel a lot of pressure to appear credible? I mean, in terms of who you decide to talk to, how you present yourself. If you show up at one crazy sci-fi convention wearing a goofy outfit, people are going to say you're a quack. You have to sort of be very dry and sober throughout all of these interactions and maybe really careful about what you say, right? To maintain the idea that you're skeptical of everything and approached in the most scientific way you could.
Well, yeah, look, I approached making this film with a journalistic approach. Like I was totally prepared to find out that there's nothing there, that it's all nonsense. That would have been fine. I really was just in pursuit of the truth. What I found out really quickly is that everyone I got an audience with, every conversation I was able to have off the record or on the record, they were all completely aligned on how serious it is and how real it is and how high the stakes are. Yeah. It was really eye-opening to me early on in my research process. I long story short, I was able to get a private audience with some high-level senators from both sides of the aisle, people who are on the most meaningful committees and privy to very sensitive classified information. And I wanted to talk with them off the record as I was preparing for this film about what could lawfully be discussed. And it was really eye-opening to me to learn inside of like a couple-day period in DC that the leaders of both political parties in our country, the leaders of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, take this extremely seriously and are completely aligned with each other on what is at stake, the issues are right now, what has to be done. And it was eye-opening because, as you know, Republican and Democratic leaders don't seem to agree on anything in our country,
Totally.
like not a single thing.
Yeah.
And so, going from early in this process when I was, doing these meetings, going from one high level, private meeting with a senator from the Republican Party to one with, someone from the Democratic Party, and hearing them say everything exactly the same and be completely in sync, and knowing they're not friends, they're not ideologically aligned, they're not politically aligned, they want nothing to do with each other, but they are completely aligned on this. It was really, to me, it told me right off the bat how serious and sober of an issue this is. And something else that a lot of the people I talked to early on made clear to me was that the stigma around this topic in our country has been bad for our country. Mm-hmm. It antiquated a logical stigma. And a number of people made it clear to me before I even made the film that the stigma was created by those who have covered this up. Mm-hmm. The people that have gatekept this information and kept it from the public created the stigma in the 40s and the 50s as a way to get people to look the other way. And when you think about it, it's actually kind of genius. If you don't want journalists and the media looking into something, make them think they would be crazy if they did. Make them think their reputations would be damaged if they did look into it. And that kind of, as one of the CIA officials in my film says, that strategy, that creation of a stigma around this, that got built into our culture, and it got compounded with each generation. And then you get to this point now, 80 years later, where there's a giggle factor around the topic, and people chuckle if you talk about UFOs or life from elsewhere. The tinfoil hat joke has arisen out of this stigma, and so learning early on in this process that was an issue, it was really clear to me, and also a number of the people that were going to participate in the film made it clear to me that it was crucial that this in no way be sensational, that we in no way cross that line of treating it as anything but a serious, credible issue with real stakes,
But it's a fun movie in that it's fun to have your mind blown. I mean, it's fun to think about ideas that you haven't really considered before and to really work through them in a serious way. It is like a very enjoyable intellectual exercise watching this. And I know that obviously some people dismiss anything with UAPs outright, but I found it really kind of head swimming, really just fascinating.
Thanks. I mean, of course, I also look, the last 20 years, I've been working as a producer in mainstream Hollywood. Ready Player One was a movie I developed for years before Steven signed on to direct it. And so, any movie I'm involved in making, I'm going to want to make sure that it also has a compelling 3-act structure, and it works like an entertaining story, right? That you can be engaged with, and characters you connect with, and a journey that you can go on with those characters. So, at the heart of the doc is this 3-act narrative set around primarily a couple intelligence officials, Jay Stratton and Lou Elizondo, who, while working in the intelligence community, realized that there was this massive issue, this massive national security concern, and they tried to raise alarm bells within the government, and they were blocked by bureaucracy and stigma around this topic. And then they uncovered that there's this deeply hidden program known as the Legacy Program that has gatekept this information, was shutting the door on them when they tried to get answers and help. And they basically decided they needed to bring about disclosure, and they needed to get this on the radar of Congress and the public in order to make change. And so they made this plan where one of them would go public and make a lot of noise in the media, and the other one would stay behind and move the ball forward. And that plan kind of pushes you into the second act of the movie, like any properly told story, a clear end of the first act that pushes you into the second act. And so yeah, I think I wanted the film to also be something that, just simply worked as a compelling narrative. Yeah.
Something you said on the Joe Rogan podcast is that you are aware of Donald Trump being aware of this documentary, and you believe that he's going to react to it in some way. Has anything moved forward with that?
Well, just to clarify, I'm aware that he's aware of the documentary for sure.
Yeah.
I'm not certain he's going to act on it. To clarify, what I said is I think that the film sets the stage for a sitting president to comfortably step to the microphone and tell the world we're not alone in the universe, which, in my opinion, would be the biggest moment in the history of humanity, and hands down the biggest moment a leader could ever have. I hope that he does that because I think it should happen sooner than later. But we'll see. But I do think the film sets the stage for a sitting president to do that, and we'll see if he does it or if it's someone after him that does it.
And whether you like him or not, he may be the only president who's enough of a maverick or wild card or whatever you want to call it to come out and do that.
Yeah, look, he talked on the campaign trail about how he wanted to bring about disclosure. He talked about it on a number of the podcasts he did. And, we're still relatively early in his administration, so we'll see. Marco Rubio, who reveals a lot of significant information about this in my film, he's now in a even more senior position. He's now Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. When I interviewed him, he was a senator. He was the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. It was right before he became Secretary of State. And then, for those that don't know, he was originally named Secretary of State in this administration. It was only a few months later that the National Security Advisor was let go, and President Trump asked Rubio to step in. So
Rubio spoke to you during the Biden administration?
Rubio spoke to me during the Biden administration, yes.
Okay, so part of me went, if this is some sort of trick by the Trump administration to distract us, maybe he sends out Marco Rubio as sort of the trial balloon, but that's not the case. This is before there was a second Trump administration.
Look, I premiered the film in March of 2025 at South by Southwest Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't even become National Security Advisor until March.
Yeah.
I know. When I made the film, Marco Rubio was the vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And, for those listening who don't know, if you're the vice chairman or the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, you are essentially aware of every piece of significant classified information. All the intelligence agencies within the Intelligence Committee report to the Senate Intelligence Committee, and make them aware of the most important matters at a classified level. All right. And there's some stuff that only goes to the vice chairman and the chairman. So Rubio became extremely informed of the reality of this situation and felt like it was important to make the public aware of the base facts that he was able to lawfully share in the film. Now he's in a very different position. Now he's the National Security Advisor, and presumably has been made aware of a lot more information on this. And his words now have a completely different, global impact. And so I would assume that, I think it's safe for everyone to assume that he has a different set of circumstances now. He has to be much less open with what he talks about, and there are bigger repercussions. So we also have to assume that he's much more aware of the current reality of the situation.
But in November, you showed this film to members of Congress. I mean, this isn't a real out there thing. People in Congress are aware of it and are. Oh yeah, no,
I held a couple secret screenings of the film before it came out with members of Congress. They're all taking it extremely seriously. I mean, your average person doesn't know, but Senator Schumer from New York, Senator Gillibrand from New York, and Senator Rounds from South Dakota have co-sponsored a very historic piece of legislation called the UAP Disclosure Act that they have been trying to pass into law 3 years in a row, actually. So, people who don't typically line up are lining up, trying to push forward historic laws to disclose what the U.S. government is keeping classified about non-human intelligent life, technology of non-human origin, and unexplainable phenomenon. And that's really fascinating. People can go online and they can find the UAP Disclosure Act and they can read it. And it's pretty eye-opening. The term non-human intelligent life is used in the proposed legislation.
Yeah.
I've been told recently that there will be a lot more efforts to pass legislation early next year on this topic. People are pretty fired up following this film and what it reveals.
Are you scared? I mean, are you scared either of extraterrestrial life or of the government coming after you?
No. Look, there's 34 very high level people in my film who do all the talking. I'm not in my film. I'm not a part of, I'm not on camera in my film. The people in my film are extremely credible and they share what they lawfully can. And in the past, the people I interviewed haven't spoken up and gone out on a limb on their own because they didn't want to be, the one guy out on a limb saying extraordinary things and being subject to the pushback or the ridicule that comes from this like antiquated stigma in our country. And so a big reason why they chose to participate in the film was because there was strength in numbers, where they were arm in arm with dozens of other very high level credible people. And that's harder for anyone to push back at, So, no, for the same reasons the interview subjects felt comfortable saying what they've said, I felt comfortable putting it forth in a film. So no.
Yeah. The UAPs seem to be monitoring our nuclear facilities. Do you have a theory about where they're from? I mean, part of me thinks, are these human beings of the future coming back to give us some sort of warning? Is that the most plausible explanation to you? Is it that it's from another universe? Like, what do you think is, in your heart of hearts, what do you think is happening?
I mean, I think there's no one answer in my takeaway, and a number of the intelligence officials in the film talk about how the possibility for the origin of non-human intelligent life, how there's various options. They talk about the possibility of them being extraterrestrial, and they talk about the possibility of them being interdimensional. They talk about the possibility of them having been here all along with us and being from here. They also, a number of the intelligence officials also make the point of saying it could be all of the above. Hal Puthoff, who's one of the main interview subjects in the film, very senior scientist who's worked on a lot of multiple highly classified UAP programs for the government. At the end of the film, he says, in one of the final scenes of the film, he says that he is happy that his grandkids will get to grow up in a world that knows the universe is full of life, and that there are many forms of life throughout the galaxy. So that's coming out of the mouth of someone who's been deeply involved in some of the most secretive government UAP programs. And, that is what my takeaway has been from talking to people like that, there's a lot of life around us and we just haven't become aware of it all.
Do you think I keep saying if, I'm sorry, but do you think that if there's extraterrestrial life, they are sort of prepping us for the big revelation? They're sort of injecting ideas into our culture so that we're a little bit less gobsmacked when they do come forward?
I don't know. It's hard to ever, assume the intention of such a big unknown factor like that. The motivation, intentions of non-human intelligent life. But I do think that another way to look at it is, I think people who have been aware of the truth around this inside of the military, intelligence community, and government, I do think over the decades they have leaked out ideas that are in line with the truth, in the hopes that it gets out into pop culture and gets in the zeitgeist. so people can start wrapping their heads around it. I do think that has happened.
Yeah. Were you kind of surprised when you saw that Steven Spielberg's new film is called Disclosure and that it seems to cover the same issues that you're covering in this documentary?
No, because, look, he made Close Encounters before I was born. He made E.T. before I was born. And, he's obviously been fascinated with this topic for a long time. There's some really great old interviews of Spielberg online from the 70s and early 80s where he's talking about his interest in this topic and his curiosity. And it's, the same curiosity and interest that I have and a lot of other people have around the world. And his films have certainly fueled that curiosity for people. Probably millions of people around the world that are interested in this because they watched Close Encounters or E.T. So, no, I as a fan of his movies, I had always hoped that he would circle back to this topic and do something else with it. So, I'm excited to see it.
And not weird that it's called Disclosure? Do you feel like has he seen your doc? Do you know?
I don't know if he's seen it yet. He's been, I know he's been head down making his movie. So I know he's, having made a movie with him, I know he is extremely focused on what he's doing when he's doing it. So, no, I don't know if he's watched it yet, but I imagine he will. And, I'm excited for him to see it.
Through the process of making this film, what has surprised you the most? What have you learned that just most shocked you or most went against your expectations?
Well, for starters, on a separate to the topic, look, I've been producing movies and TV shows for 20 years, and this was the first thing I went and directed. And so I don't think I would say shocked is the right word, but one learning for me was that how much I enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the process of directing. It's a different, different role for me, and I learned a lot doing it, and I'd be excited to do it again if I figure out the right project. In terms of this topic, I would say the thing that shocked me the most was learning how concerned very real, credible people inside of the military, government, intelligence communities are about the high stakes race we're in with adversarial nations like China to reverse engineer this technology of non-human origin. The way they talk about it, both on camera and off camera, is extremely sober and serious, and you could feel it when you're talking to them. Like there's a scene in the movie where Rubio says that if essentially he's saying if we don't take this topic more serious as a nation, we could wake up one day and find that China's gotten there before us. And to quote him, he says, "We won't know how they got there or when they got there, but we'll be screwed." Mm-hmm. And when he says we'll be screwed, I'm sitting 3 feet away from him doing the interview, and like I felt it, I felt how unbelievably seriously concerned he was. It was no different than if you're talking to someone who works in counterterrorism and they're concerned about, terrorist threats to, commercial airlines or something like that. Like you could feel how much weight he had on his shoulders thinking about this. And so I think having conversations like that, both the ones that you can now see on camera in the film and the ones that happened off camera, it was really shocking to me to realize how real and high stakes that is.
Yeah. There was a book that came out a few years ago. I forget the author's name, but she was, I believe, an LA Times reporter, and she did a story about what really happened. She did a book about what really happened at Roswell, and it was that they found humanoid-looking creatures inside of a craft and ultimately determined that Stalin had sent that craft to mess with us, basically, to scare us, to maybe provoke us into doing something foolish. Have you considered the possibility that this is all part of some broader effort to kind of mess with our minds by other governments?
I don't think there's any reason to believe that.
Do you know the book I'm talking about? I forget the author's name. I wish I remembered it. Okay.
No, look, a couple of the intelligence officials I I went on the record talking about the details of the crash that happened at Roswell and how the technology, the recovered elements of the craft, and the non-human bodies that were found at the crash site were brought to Wright Pat Air Force Base in Ohio, where at the time the Army Air Corps had their best reverse engineers, and they talk about the reality of that situation.
Yeah. If there's one person you could sit down and sort of, I don't know, inject with truth serum and get the answers that you really wanted, who would it be?
Ooh, it's a good question.
I mean, I'm curious about what George W. Bush saw over his ranch in Crawford, Texas, that he doesn't want to talk about.
Yeah. He doesn't, a big scene in the film is one of the intelligence officials I interviewed talks about how during Bush II's presidency, shortly after 9/11, his administration held a very secretive think tank where they selected a number of people to come and participate in a confidential sort of debate over whether the administration should tell the world we're not alone in the universe. Bush had learned some base facts. He learned that, A, we're not alone in the universe. He learned that there has been some recovered technology of non-human origin. And there was a thought in his administration that it was time to tell the public. And they held this multi-day, very secretive think tank where they asked people to rate from 1 to 10, like, negative to positive impact on various elements of society, the economy, religion, all these different verticals that they came up with. I don't remember the whole list, but it was like 60 different categories of our culture. And the intelligence official in my film, who was a part of this, said that at the offset, people were optimistic about bringing about disclosure. And then once they sort of ran the numbers, as he said, and thought about what the impacts could be, they decided that it wasn't a good idea, at least at that moment in time, shortly after 9/11, when the world was sort of, full of chaos. That's that was a really surprising thing to learn, that, while the rest of us were still reeling from the impact of 9/11 and the war on, watching the updates on the war on terror on the news every night, there was this secret meeting held by the Bush administration that would determine whether we became aware of massive fundamental truths, like our place in the universe. And, it's wild to know that that's actually, that was a part of our history, that conversation happened inside of an administration. So Bush did learn a lot, and his father before him had learned a lot, but they have obviously kept quiet about it. I would say that if there was a group of people that you could get to talk about this, it would be the folks who have been involved in the program referred to as the Legacy Program. The specific people at CIA and at the Air Force and Department of Energy and defense contractors who have been involved with this. And I think their perspective would be really fascinating and informative. I don't, for those who will go on to watch this, or people who have watched it, in the film, a number of the interview subjects reveal that there's a deeply hidden program called the Legacy Program that has been gatekeeping this information for 80 years and has been running a UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. And a lot of people out in the zeitgeist on social media have sort of, for lack of a better word, villainize these people as if they're keeping the truth from us. They must be bad. And as I went down this road of researching this topic, it quickly became pretty clear to me that they're not villains of the story. They're not villains in the sense of the word villains. They're not bad guys. They're people who are doing the job they were given to do, and they're doing a job that there's no playbook for, right? There was no previous set of circumstances for how to handle this situation, right? So essentially they were they were making the best of a not so great situation, right? Yeah. And so I think there's a lot to learn from their perspective, if it can ever come out, the way they've looked at this situation, the choices they've made, and what they think can be done better in the future, like that. What we've learned from this, what we haven't learned from this. Those would be the conversations I would be the most interested to have, and hopefully there'll be a point in time soon where some of those people step out of the shadows and speak up more. Rubio says a great line in the film that I'm glad he did say. He said, in talking about the pursuit of the truth, with regard to all this, he says it's not an endeavor to go out and punish anyone, but nonetheless, we need to know what they've learned. And I think he said that because he came to the same conclusion I did, going down a rabbit hole of researching this, that the people who've been involved with this, who have legal restraint on what they can talk about, they're never gonna share what they've learned or talk about it if they're, treated like villains or criminals. And I think we all need to kind of take a step back and say, while we wish we knew more, it doesn't serve anybody to treat those people like villains or criminals. We just need to understand the circumstances that they're in and they've been in, and then try to find the best path for moving forward.
Yeah. Is there anything that you want people to know about the film that we haven't touched on?
No, look, I think it's really important that the average person watch this film and learn the reality of the situation, learn it's a valid situation. There's real stakes, and it should become a national conversation. And I think movies in general have the power to do that, to drive national conversations. And, you don't need to know anything about this topic to sit down and watch this movie. And when you're done watching it, you'll be fully informed of the situation, and in a way that only movies can do, And so I just encourage everyone to share the movie with their friends and family. And, this holiday season, people get together and watch it and talk about it. And then if you feel inclined, reach out to your elected representatives and tell them you want them to take this more seriously and you want to get more transparency on this. So that's what I hope comes out of this.
And finally, what is your life now? I mean, do you take your investigative skills to another area, or are you all in on UAPs and going deeper into this story?
We'll see. I think I really enjoyed making this, and I really enjoyed the process of directing and producing a documentary. I've always had a desire to, develop big commercial stories like, Ready Player One, the Shannara Chronicles. So I'll continue to do that. And I know there's a number of projects that I'm developing that I'm really excited about. Some of them have nothing to do with UAP, and some of them do. So we'll see. I see where it all takes me.
Well, thanks for making this, and thanks for talking with me. We've gone way over time, but I could talk to you for 3 more hours. It's so fascinating. So just thank you so much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Hope you have a great holiday.
You too. Happy holidays.